This is the story of how a regular guy named Ben Howell was the only human to have ever been lost in space, with only a handful of people knowing of the failed mission. But worse than this was, unbeknown to him, the people who had sent him up there had never intended him to return.
It was a dream job. I received my master's in astrophysics after everyone telling me it was a waste of money and time, and I should be qualifying in something that I could actually get a job in afterwards, and not just be an overqualified science teacher. I mean, those comments used to wind me right up. And as it turned out, even more so when I did graduate it and ended up working as a teacher at my local school. And not even a science teacher. Oh, God. Yeah, they had me on maths as they were short-staffed. Anyway, finally getting that job offer at Equinox Space Agency, well, it just validated my work, it validated all my efforts, and more importantly, I felt it just validated me. And I was just over the moon. Like, literally over the moon. I was brought in on the interstellar project, which is sending spacecraft to go beyond the moon and out into space.
Jenna began working for Equinox in the autumn of 2022. It was a privately run space agency based in an unassuming building on an industrial complex just outside Solihull in the West Midlands, and set up by two ex-hedge fund bankers. That's right, bankers. These guys weren't scientists. In fact, they had no history in aerospace, but they did see a future business opportunity in commercial space travel, as well as having experience in raising vast amounts of money through private investors, something which was key to leading the charge in that industry. Even more unusual was that they outsourced the launching of its craft to an agency in Kerala, India, but all planning and management of the mission was carried out from its Solihull hub.
Unfortunately, my excitement for the role quickly waned when I realised it was run like an absolute show. They ran it as you'd imagine a space agency run by two egotistical ex-bankers with no concept or appreciation for the intricacies of spaceflight. How do we cut corners here and save money there? That was pretty much their mantra, and there's very little transparency, to the point of there being like secret departments there and areas that not only wasn't I allowed to work in, but not even allowed to enter. It just made no sense to me. The Capcom team, the interior monitoring team, as it was known, where measurements from the inside of the cabin and where measurements on the fauna and lab rats were monitored. Well, I couldn't even get access to that area, although we were all in the same team working to the same objectives. It was just really strange.
Equinox's vision was to be a leading provider in commercial spaceflight, and to do this, they were investing heavily in the research of interstellar travel, sending unmanned craft up and beyond the moon, into outer space, and measuring not only the effect it has on the crafts themselves to shape future designs, but also the effects on the fauna and lab rats that were sent up with it to help shape the eventual customer experience. Jenna's role was as a junior flight dynamics officer. Her small team monitored and manoeuvred trajectories of the flight.
The situation with the partners wasn't ideal, but I was still working in aerospace, so that was a positive. Well, that was until the bailiffs entered the offices one morning, a few weeks after me starting, and began shutting everything down, telling us to vacate the premises immediately. The company basically had gone into liquidation, and the two weasels that were our bosses, Sam Edge and his partner, Nathan Jones, were nowhere to be seen. They'd scarpered basically without saying a word to us, like the rats they were, and it was just heartbreaking and humiliating.
Edge and Jones had racked up millions in debt to get the business off the ground, but 2 years in, without any returns, as well as their lack of transparency, it had rattled the major investors, who had now lost faith and were pulling the plug. The staff were told to leave and the premises vacated and locked up. Jenna went back to teaching and endured the "I told you so's" from her family and friends.
I'd been back teaching, well, supply teaching, arguably the worst kind of teaching, for a few weeks when I went out drinking in Solihull one Thursday night to basically drown my sorrows. I was feeling pretty sorry for myself, and while I was drunk and I pulled this guy and we were fooling around, and I just had this drunken, harebrained idea to take him back to the abandoned Equinox offices, as they were just at the back of the town centre. I still have the old security fob, and I was drunk, so of course I thought all this would work.
But her old fob did work. In vacating the premises, the bailiffs hadn't secured the premises properly and hadn't deactivated the door entry system. Jenna and her male guest walked right in.
It was pretty weird. Firstly, that we were able to get in, and secondly, just seeing it abandoned, pretty much exactly as it was the day I left, but with all the lights and screens off.
Except this was in the Capcom interior comms room that had separate security clearance needed. In there, its main console was lit up with flashing lights.
I just thought I'd try and get in, try my luck again. My fob didn't work, but the door did just swing open. And just like that, I was in what had been the most secure and protected area of the business. And it was completely untouched. The guy I was with didn't quite share my enthusiasm and was more interested in finding beers in the fridge. But I took a look around and I could see the console still monitoring the levels in the interior of the spacecraft cabin. I suppose up until that point I hadn't given it much thought, but the ship was still flying through space and all sorts of results were still beaming back down to that room. And I mean, in effect, it was a ghost ship flying through space.
Everything from the internal radiation levels to temperature were being beamed back. But what surprised Jenna the most was the physiological results, such as heart rate and blood pressure levels, that were showing up on the screen.
I just assumed it was the data for the rats they had on board, which actually made me feel pretty sad, thinking these rodents were flying through space to their eventual death. But then I heard a cough, and it was coming from the ship's cabin.
She quickly ruled it out being her gentleman friend. He was now passed out on a sofa. She listened in delicate silence for several minutes and then heard another cough come through, followed by the distant sound of a man mumbling.
There was a button on the console that said something like "switch to microphone" and a sticky note that read, "Ensure this is switched to off if having a mission conversation or having mission conversations," and something like that. I switched it on anyway, and I just said something like, "Hello, is anyone there?" And after a delay of a minute or two, a desperate sounding voice answered back.
The voice was that of Ben Howell, a 45-year-old man from London who was aboard the interstellar shuttle.
Like, none of this is making sense to me. How can a man be aboard an unmanned spacecraft that is hurtling towards the outer edges of our solar system as part of a now abandoned mission? But I can't get the answers I need. This man's going crazy, demanding he speak to one of the mission control directors, and then also I'm dealing with a significant delay of what felt like a couple of minutes.
The man eventually calmed, and they agreed to ask a maximum of 3 questions at a time and adopt the radio comms over command. But what Ben revealed shook Jenna to her core.
His first 3 questions were, where was Sam Edge, the owner and director? Why had no one from Mission Control been in touch lately? And when was the date confirmed for his return to Earth? I was just shell-shocked. I was and thankful for that signal delay, to be honest. I just didn't know what to say. I wasn't going to tell him that Sam had abandoned the project and closed the whole mission down. So I lied. I just said I was new there and I was looking into it for him. And I just felt terrible. And the more information I extracted from him, the worse it became. The mission had launched over a year previous, So this Ben Howell had been travelling through space for this long, and as far as he was concerned, his return home was imminent.
But the abandoned office, the shut down systems, the deleted files, they all told a different story. Ben Howell revealed that he'd been recruited by Sam and sent to India, where he'd trained for several months to prepare himself for space. His mission, he was told, was to simply orbit the Earth for 6 to 9 months, hooked up to monitors that measured his physiological functions, as well as undertaking regular cognitive assessments to test his psychological state, his reasoning, and altering IQ.
What was also alarming was that he just didn't sound very well. The radiation levels coming back to the control centre were showing me that they were through the roof, and his vitals, well, they were bad when I thought they were for a rat, never mind a human. And then there was his belief that he was orbiting Earth, and I knew from the work that I did on the Interstellar project that he wasn't orbiting the Earth. That mission was to send a craft on a one-way mission to outer space. And, well, that realisation that he'd been sold a lie was just devastating.
As it turned out, the entry system wasn't the only thing that the authorities had failed to shut down properly. The computer system was still live, and Jenna was able to log in using her old account. In doing so, she managed to access the live trajectory data for the craft, and her worst fears were realised.
Ben wasn't orbiting the Earth. He was nowhere near the Earth. He was nearly 350 million kilometres from Earth. 350 million. I felt sick, and like a coward I raced out there and just ran home. But I couldn't sleep at all that night, thinking of him out there in outer space on his own, hurtling towards nothingness, and him not even knowing the truth.
First thing in the morning, she called the numbers she had for both Sam and Nathan, but they didn't connect. The numbers were dead. She tried finding numbers for some of the people she'd worked with for that short time, but with no success. She even visited Solihull Police Station to report it, but unable to convince them. They were more concerned with her trespassing on the property.
I knew I had to go back there. I had to talk to him and just tell him the truth. He deserved that at the very least. So I called in sick to the school and headed over there. And when I arrived, I could hear him singing to himself. I sat there in the dark, in silence, and just listened. And it was just beautiful. It was just so powerful. He told me later it was an old Irish folk song by an artist named Christy Moore, and I will always remember the line. It was, I turn to face an empty space where once you used to lie, and look for a spark that lights the night through a teardrop in my eye. He sung those words like it was written for him. And when we got talking again, he was understandably upset. I mean, I'd left him without telling him anything, and he was still wanting to talk to Sam. So I told him almost everything. I told him how the mission had been shut down. Sam and Nathan had disappeared, and that Ben being up there was a secret, known only by a small select group of people, which hadn't even included me. I was told it was a rat in a cage we had sent up there, and he said that was exactly what he was to them. And then he fell silent, and it wasn't just the signal delay.
He eventually asked Jenna if she could bring him home.
And I lied a second time to him. I told him that I would try. I guess I believed in the power of hope. When there's hope, there's salvation. Oh, but it was just so damn naive.
Ben was 350 million kilometres from Earth, with little fuel left, and even if there had been enough to turn him around and travel the 350 million kilometres back, he was getting sicker, and he most likely wouldn't make that return journey. She told him she was going to get working on it though.
I'd cry myself to sleep most nights and just go in the next day with this false cheeriness, tell him it was all going to be fine, that I was making breakthroughs and we'd get through this. But I just felt awful, like I was now in some way complicit with this evil deception of him being up there.
Okay, sure, Ben. Let me look into that for you. And one other thing, what's it like out there?
It's lonely, Jenna. It's isolation like nothing I've ever known. Stare out, there's nothing above, nothing below, nothing in front. Only tiny specks of light that never change. I'm looking into infinity, Jenna, with nothing that anchors me to humanity, other than seeing my own icy breath and feeling the clumps of hair that fall out every time I run my fingers through it. And how is it down there?
Well, let me see. I live in a world where the super rich eat the average man, where super wealthy men can send a man to space, only to forget about him, with seemingly no repercussions. So yeah, maybe you don't need to miss humanity that much.
Well, maybe I just miss being able to breathe properly and feel the effects of gravity on my flaccid muscles.
Ben opened up more with each visit, and when he'd ask for an update, Jenna would lie and feed him misinformation to protect him from the truth.
Truth be told, Jenna, I'm scared. I'm on the edge all the time. I know I'm dying, probably from the radiation. I don't know. My body feels like it's shutting down, and I need alarms that keep going off. If you could see the console right now, it's lit up like a damn Christmas tree. Errors, malfunctions. Apparently another heat shield has gone down. My nerves shred every time I look at it. I think is this the alarm that's gonna be the end? Although you and everyone before you told me it was all gonna be okay. Jenna, years ago, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He said every time he'd go see his consultant, he'd hang on every word she said, pick every sentence apart for signs of hope that he was going to make it despite the negative results. He'd read so much into those interactions that he'd end up twisting himself to the point of getting sick. He compared it to digging through sand to look for a penny. But you know what? He said that the best consultation he ever had was when she told him that his cancer was terminal and he only had months to live. He said it freed him. He was no longer a slave to hope, and he could just get on and die on his own terms. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jenna? Don't make me search for the penny if it's not there.
Jenna fell silent. She left for the day and felt sadder and angrier than any time before. When she went in the next morning, he was singing a song brightly to himself, and when they spoke, it was normal, like the conversation the night before hadn't been had. He talked about a dream he'd had and how he'd experienced a beautiful, profound moment just hours before.
When I looked out, Jenna, I didn't feel that deep despair and insignificance that normally accompanies this view. I felt huge. I felt like the most important human to ever exist, looking at a view that no man had ever set eyes on before. I was the furthest that anyone's ever been from the earth, and let me tell you now, that feels pretty special. No explorers come close to experiencing what I'm experiencing. So I think it's time, Jenna. I know there's not enough fuel to send me all the way back, never mind enough to slow me down for re-entry. But I suspect there's enough to nudge me towards the sun and let me sail peacefully towards it.
I didn't know what to say. Once again, I was proving to be inept, completely out of my depth, unsuited to this situation where a man's life was on the line, and he wanted me to pull the trigger, send him to his death.
I'm tired of feeling ill. I'm tired of feeling scared. And I don't want to spend however long I've got getting weaker and more anxious. And I'm tired of being a slave to hope. This way ends on my terms.
The ship's remaining fuel allowance did just about make this possible. The sun was about 10 million miles away from his current position, 2 months away given its current speed. This meant only 4 weeks from disintegrating from the cataclysmic heat.
So I agreed. I logged into the system and altered the trajectory by diverting the last remaining powers to the right, facing boosters. He'd be dead in less than a month. And I just went home and cried myself to sleep.
Jenna had given up her job as a supply teacher and now made it her mission to be with him every day and talk with him while he approached death. It meant they learnt more about each other.
I found him to be this genuinely humble, lovely, unassuming guy. He was unmarried, led a quiet life, had a huge passion for solo hiking and exploring the English countryside. All probable reasons why Sam Edge had chosen him as his little rat in space. A loner with few people to come asking questions. It was just so sad. But I genuinely felt enriched chatting to him. He was this wealth of knowledge, educated me on, everything from the species of birds and butterflies we get here to his in-depth knowledge of our stars and planets. He was truly fascinating. And you know what? He'd always start the conversation off by asking how I was getting on and ask about my evening. A real gent. I cherished those conversations we had, and as the weeks passed, and although he wouldn't share his discomfort with me as he fast approached the sun, I knew he was close, and I knew it would be getting hotter and brighter and more painful for him, and I could also tell he was losing his sight as a result.
When the end did come, it seemed quicker than Jenna had thought.
I could almost hear the energy. The roar of the sun and the panic in his tone told me he was close.
I may now be as blind as a bat, but I've never felt happier. It feels so beautiful on me, like I'm being glazed. My body, the cells, they're going home, Jenna, to where it all started, and it's like they must know it. I guess this must just sound crazy, but only someone in my position can truly understand this, Jenna. Just promise me you don't feel bad or won't feel bad, but feel happy that you were able to do this for me. I'm the only person that can say I'm going back to nature's womb, to where life began for us all. And that makes me pretty special. So thank you, Jenna. Thank you.
Jenna closed the system down fully and deleted all evidence of the project. She left and threw away her fob. The next day she placed an obituary in the local newspaper describing the sad death of the explorer
Ben Howell, a true gentleman and scholar who taught those fortunate to know him many things, including the power in letting go.